lot of that stuff is in the hands of the DNC. You can't like fund yourself once the campaign is over. Like there are rules around like what you can do with that money, but I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure you can't just like fund. You can't just like, I guess you could technically sit on it and not give it to anyone else and be like, you guys, okay, I'm not using these funds, but there's, I don't, as far as I know, as far as I understand, I don't think there's like restrictions on what to do with the additional campaign funds in the end of a run, or if a person drops out of a race, like you can, I'm pretty sure you can like put it into other campaigns as long as it's not like personal use, you know what I mean? But they noted via email that Harris would only be able to access those funds if she's at the top of the ticket. In other words, if she remained vice presidential nominee and the party picked a different presidential nominee, that would be a different campaign. No, okay. Here, let's look at this. What would happen to Biden's campaign cash if he drops out? That's up to Kamala Harris. No, Kamala Harris has direct control over it as she is like on the campaign, okay? She has direct control over it as she is on the campaign. But as far as like, you're asking me if there are legal restrictions as to like taking the money, like as if Biden decides to drop out personally, and then where does he take that money? Where does he take that cash? There are restrictions on how you can use that money, of course, right? You can't just like pocket it. That would be ridiculous. You can't just like pay hush money to a porn star and then misappropriate or misallocate those funds, or right, that you're just doing a legal retainer or some shit, famously, okay? Someone that did that. I can't recall who it was, but I feel like there was a person who did that. But Harris's name is listed on the FEC filings for both Biden's statement of candidacy and his campaign account for statement of organization, meaning she would likely be able to use the funds if she continues with the campaign. Campaign finance law also states that a campaign committee designated by a presidential candidate can be used by the party's vice presidential candidate. Both candidates are on the account, okay? But they noted via email that Harris would only be able to access those funds if she was at the top of the ticket. In other words, if she remained the vice presidential nominee and the party picked a different presidential nominee, that would be a different campaign. Gross said he was unsure if Harris was unable to access the funds if she remained the party's vice presidential nominee without Biden. That is such a unique scenario. I would think the campaign would want to seek an FEC opinion on that question, okay? Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket makes it easier because she has direct access to the funds. But as far as like additional law, like additional legal considerations as to like Biden, okay? Yeah, there it is, dude. If Harris did not become the nominee under this scenario, the campaign's legal center campaign finance team noted that Biden's campaign money could be converted into a PAC, but a PAC can only make a small maximum donation of $3,300 per election to another candidate. The Biden campaign could also refund donors' contributions, who could in turn donate to a new candidate, which no, I'm telling you, there are ways around this. That's ridiculous, okay? No. It doesn't. No, I don't know why you guys are saying like Sam Cedar said this as well. Like, no, I don't believe that all of a sudden you have to light that money on fire. You know what I mean? New York Times says federal campaigns can transfer directly to the DNC. There you go. PACs can only donate a small amount directly, but can't they just buy ads for the new candidate? Exactly. Read the next paragraph too. Rashawn and Gross also noted that if Biden steps aside, the funds could be transferred to a charity or a super PAC, which would not be able to coordinate with the campaign. The funds could also be transferred to the national party. There you go. So what's up? Guys, we live in the United States of America. What the fuck are you talking about? You think that there is like actual genuine legal boundaries on this shit? That's laughable. Excuse me. I think you forgot what country we're in for a brief moment when you thought that the the legal lines are drawn almost exclusively around doing whatever the f you want, okay? Yeah. We're in a post-Citizens United world. There's no shot that they can't just like juggle that thing around as much as they want. No, Sam just said with Kamala, it's easier. Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, like I agree, of course. Kamala has direct access if she's at the top of the ticket. Kamala has direct access. I understand that. But as far as like using that money, the idea that it's gonna like poo is very silly. Okay, no shot. No way, no shot. Anyway, latest, President Biden's biggest supporters and skeptics in the Senate remained at odds after a closed-door meeting on Tuesday afternoon. Oh my God. Anyway, have you covered this? Definitely going to affect my job as an environmental scientist. The Chevron deference, yes. I have briefly covered it. We'll talk about it a little bit more potentially today. I was shocked to find out that you have 200+ MasterChef videos. Ha ha ha. Let me tell you, don't be shocked. I am not a political commentator. I am a MasterChef reactor originally. Okay, let's get back to this shit show of a press conference, and then we'll move on a little bit if there's not enough drama.
That I can speak to from here. Go ahead, Karen. Thank you. The president's come out very aggressively in the past 24 hours. That letter to Democrats, the call into MSNBC, the call of donors, the CDC last night. Was that his decision personally to step up that outreach? It has been.
He's ready. He's on fire. He's ready to go. And he wants to get out there and continue to show that he has more work to do, right? He has more important issues for the American people to get done. And so he wants to get out there. He's always has, though. I mean, the last 2.5 years, 3 years, 3.5 years, he looks forward to getting out there, speaking directly to the American people. And I know we say this, and I know sometimes you guys don't believe us, but he does want to engage with you. He does want to talk to us. And so now we're certainly going to continue to create opportunities to do that. He's done interviews 47 times in this year alone, and we're going to continue to create opportunities to do this. We're going to get out there so he can engage with the American people more directly. So we're going to continue to do that.
But in terms of, especially in the last 24 hours, that type of outreach to ease concerns among Democrats about his campaign continuing, was there something specific that he heard or read that prompted this? It seemed more like a flurry over the last 24 hours that didn't happen last week. We really saw him doing more.
No, I get it. No, I get the question. Look, I wouldn't say there's anything specific. This is something that he wanted to do. And if you think about it, he's been on the road a lot since the debate. He was on the road on Friday. He was on the road on Sunday, and then right out of the debate, right, he did about 2.5 days, going into about 4 states. So he's just been on the road, busy, engaging with Americans. And did the ABC interview, as you know, obviously. And so he wants to do more. He wants to do more. There's nothing specific, but he understands. He understands what you all saw, right? He understands he had a bad debate. He understands that what Americans saw. So he wants to go out there and continue to prove to all of you that he can continue to do the work. And the
Allies are capturing zone A.
Okay, I can't keep listening to this over and over again. All right. Biden's doctor releases letter amid a report. A Parkinson's specialist visited the White House. This was a big deal yesterday. New York Times did some reporting on it. A Parkinson's specialist, like a neurologist with a specialty in Parkinson's, visited the White House 8 times on 8 different instances and actually had correspondence with Biden's personal physician. This obviously became a matter of importance, especially right now as people are calling into question Biden's mental faculties. And Karine Jean-Pierre had a heated exchange yesterday in the press conference with Ed O'Keefe. Anyway, let's take a look at this new letter that was released by Biden's doctor on his potential for having Parkinson's.
Begin, though, with a defiant President Biden pushing back very forcefully against pressure to drop out of this presidential race. On live TV yesterday, he dared anyone in his party to challenge him for the nomination. And now he is winning some key support from members of Congress. Also this morning, the administration is clarifying why a neurologist made multiple visits to the White House. Nancy Cordes, of course, is following all of this. Nancy, good morning. There are so many questions today. Good to see you.
Good morning, Gail. And now we have some answers. Late last night, the president's personal physician released this letter stating that a neurologist who has visited the White House repeatedly over the past year was not here to care for President Biden and has been treating patients from time to time in the White House medical unit for the past 12 years. The Biden camp making the case aggressively Monday that it is now time for the party to move on. President Biden made it through Monday without any new Democratic defections and with some key backing from his party's House leader.
I support President Joe Biden and the Democratic ticket.
And from...
That was a weird one, too. He said, I support Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, and the Democratic ticket. I thought that was strange. Like, the way he positioned that, I thought was kind of odd. Because it's like, why don't you just say you support President Joe Biden and him running, like him staying on the ticket? I thought he said for. No, I know. I'm pretty sure he said and President Joe Biden and the Democratic ticket. Anyway, he's just playing it safe. You know who's not playing it safe? AOC. I mean, I guess she technically is playing politics and is playing it safe. in terms of the Hassan, you are coping. Wait, what? No, I'm not. No. Make no mistake. I'm seeing the writing on the wall. I'm saying that the Democrats are probably going to go with Joe. I think that they're going to go with Joe because they're stupid and cowardly and also have no backbone and can't even do something that is going to ultimately help them in the long run. She's playing politics for her own personal ambitions that is benefiting the working class. Dude, I love. This is so stupid. Guys, what difference does it make in this circumstance? Like, what could she be doing that would benefit the working class? We're talking about electoral politics. We're talking about the Democratic Party. Like, no, seriously, in this moment, she should be like, what? We should kill Joe Biden? Is that what you should be saying? Like, we should do a proletarian revolution? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, I think that her instinct to go above and beyond to defend Joe Biden instead of just saying, I'm sitting this one out is bad, okay? Not smart to do that. It's not smart to go balls to the wall in the way that she did. You can look at other progressive politicians, a part of the progressive caucus, and that are obviously anti-establishment Democrat for the most part, who have been phenomenally critical of Biden's administration, saying much lighter things about Biden, even though they do also take a stance that is significantly more pro-Biden than the top of the establishment institutionalist Democrats. You have to ask, why? Why is Nancy Pelosi more concerned about taking Biden out than AOC? For AOC, it's win-win. Everybody knows she's going to be a galvanizing force for the youth vote. She is a progressive figurehead in the party. She is the progressive beacon in the Democratic Party. She is, in many respects, most of the time considered an outsider. The squad is always considered outsiders in general. Ultimately, her sitting this one out and allowing the actual establishment Democrats who have significantly more staying power, significantly more momentum in changing course, changing the trajectory of what the DNC does, than AOC. But she didn't sit it out. She basically came out and was like, yo, I love Biden. He's the best. He's the best on the ticket. He's the best we got, which I think is bad. I think that it's silly to go above and beyond. As far as playing politics goes, if Biden stays on the ticket, then she has more access to Biden in her own personal calculation. She has more access to Biden, not to do a proletarian revolution, mind you. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. She has more access to Biden to get certain things, get better, more access to the Democratic Party's leadership, better committee positions, better way to enact at least some parts of the legislative agenda, that kind of thing. But if Biden isn't the top of the ticket, as the Democratic Party's establishment figureheads are demanding he drop out as quietly as possible, okay, as best as they possibly can, then it doesn't matter because she's still a progressive bulwark. So they're gonna, they're not gonna be like, oh, you defended Biden, so we're not giving you shit. That's it. But as far as in this moment, you need to understand, you cannot rely on politicians. You cannot expect politicians to legitimately, you cannot expect politicians to basically, especially progressive politicians in this moment, while the establishment politicians are the ones who are demanding that Biden step out. Why would progressive politicians put their name on the board? Okay. Why would they put themselves out there? It makes no sense. There is no reason for Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and all these people who have been up Biden's ass nonstop to put their name out there as anti-Biden. There's just no reason for them to do so when Nancy Pelosi is the one doing it. The only thing you do in that situation is potentially get a bunch of people who are geared towards hating you anyway to go, see, it's the woke socialists that want Biden out. Biden is the best guy we have. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why you guys don't see this. Yeah, all of a sudden, you're just giving the Biden holdouts more ammunition to be like, see, the left is interested in destroying the party. We're gonna lose because of the left, and not because Joe Biden is old as shit. Because they're scared of young progressives splitting the vote and Trump winning. They're trying to do a French election. No, what? I'm not a Brandon Duke writer, but honestly, I have a hard time seeing how we could have a better option for defeating Trump. Every single person that is committed to voting for Joe Biden right now is already going to vote for whoever the Democratic Party candidate. Not a single person is going to be like, I'm not voting. if it's not Biden. And any other candidate would bring additional votes on top of that. I was originally mad at Bernie, but you're right. Yeah, I don't like, this is not a circumstance. This is not a circumstance where progressives coming out. Ilhan Omar has literally been up Biden's asshole, okay, about this Gaza shit. Even AOC has been very outwardly critical about the immigration stuff that Biden has done, and also Gaza. She was on this broadcast criticizing.
No, he had the helmet. He had the helmet protection.
Be advised.
Okay. It's like whenever stuff happens, you just like naturally complain. As a gamer, I feel like it's a very normal thing to do. Something doesn't work as intended, or even if it is working as intended, like the spider bot, and it's just freaking annoying. As a gamer, I feel like it's our responsibility to sit there and bitch and moan. Now, it doesn't mean you have to sit there and cry 24/7. At a certain point, it's just like, if the game really bothers you that much, don't play the game. I'm looking at like every Call of Duty YouTuber ever right now. But I think, you know, a little rage, a little complaining, it never hurt anyone, right? Maybe. Dude, I'm so god awful. I want to get into sniping because every time I see clips of people sniping on XDEFIANT, it actually looks kind of juicy. It does make me a little wet, not gonna lie, brother man. Okay, you had a shield. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't hitting that anyways, but you had a shield. But there you go. Like, for example, the shield. Well, I personally don't have a problem with the Phantoms. The 120 HP has definitely been like a point of contention for the XDEFIANT community. You're either somebody who doesn't mind it, you kind of just think like, oh, it's because they're the tank role of XDEFIANT. You know, it makes sense from a hero shooter perspective. Or you're somebody who's like, nah, this makes gunfights inconsistent and it just doesn't feel good. I shot him in the wiener. Come here. Peek it again. Circumcised in the forehead. That doesn't even make sense. But then you got things like the spider bot. Like, for me, it's the spider bot. That is the ability I don't like. I don't think it's OP. I don't think it's relatively strong compared to a bunch of the other abilities in the game. I just think it's fucking annoying and it's cheesy for the sake of being cheesy. Nice. Like, respectfully, if you're somebody who uses the spider bot all the time and you really want to know what it's like to be on the opposing end, on the opposite end of your spider spam, but go to the corner of your room and stick your finger up your ass. Oh, didn't even hit him, but I'll take it.
Allies securing zone A.
Oh, come on.
Zone compromised.
What?
Popping in a new man.
My dude just put barbed wire down at the, like, I can't even go up this. I can't even melee that if I climb. Stop. You're bad. Hell, there you go. There's another issue that a lot of people have been complaining about is snipers. Some people think snipers are too OP, and then people who snipe are like, oh, the flinch is too strong. There's a certain point where I think it's just like nobody's always going to be happy. You're never going to make everybody happy. So it's like you got to half-ass listen to the community on some things. You know, obviously it's good to listen to the players and listen to the community, but sometimes I think people are just complaining to complain. Like, if you were to fix everything that people have complained about so far in XDEFIANT, people would still then find something else to complain about. If you remove the snipers and every single ability in the game, people will then probably complain, oh, the footsteps are too loud, oh, the spawns are bad, oh, this gun's OP and this gun's OP. Like, people just aren't gonna always be happy. It's a gamer's thing to complain. I'm telling you, I have never met somebody who games and doesn't complain at least a little bit. But I didn't even click my, I hate my paddles. I didn't want to shoot my shield, and then I cut myself because I fisted my fucking controller paddle, and I shoot when I respawn. Fix the bug. Fix the game. The game sucks. Bad game. I'm joking. It's like when I said you like using the spider bot, you know, you want to know what it's like, go stick a finger up your ass. I already know somebody's gonna be commenting down in the comment section, oh, but Decoy, you know, I'm a classy man. Wow, but Decoy, I'm a classy man. I actually like to stick a little pinky in the stinky. You know, there's no shame in a little finger game, but if you like it, then try doing something a little less pleasurable. Go the little Nicky route. Stick a fucking pineapple up your ass. That's what playing against the spider bot 24/7 feels like. Actually, it kind of been blessed this game. I don't think they got a single spider bot on either team. Like I said, the DedSec isn't really that good. The spider bot is my only complaint with this game too. I mean, there's other things that are annoying, like I said, the Phantom 120 HP and the mag barrier, or the Libertard ult, or like there's stuff that's annoying, but that's gonna be the case with any ability hero shooter-esque game. I mean, hell, even if you take all the abilities away, go over to COD. COD has no abilities. Modern Warfare 3 getting cross-mapped by a fucking shotgun, yeah, believe it or not, that's kind of fucking annoying. Actually, one of the things I really like about XDEFIANT is how they dealt with shotguns. Can I throw, yeah, right between the crack. Hit marker. Come on, climb up. I'm gone. I'm running. I'm scared. I mean, I'll take it. I didn't do like particularly well. But yeah, those are the more tangible things that you can complain about. Things that I think people complain about as a way of venting almost. Now, granted, people can complain, oh, the hit rate's bad, or the servers are bad, or this and that and the other's bad. Like more fundamental flaws with the game and stuff like that just happens. You know, you just gotta wait it out, let it be patched, let it be fixed. If it is that big of a deal to you, just take a break. There's no need to like, no, if it's not fixed right now, I'm quitting the game. Like, holy shit, you sound like a little bit of a baboosy, brother man. Okay, I gotta go. I have people here for me. It's the FBI. If I don't return, somebody please take over my YouTube channel. My password is McDaddyLongPole69, capital N. I hope this isn't the end for us. Over and out.
Friendly forces defeated.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, we are staying close to home. My home. That is, because Jesus, we're in Ireland for this one. This is the story of Ireland's greatest mystery. It's really up there. It's kind of underrated as mysteries go. Though even mystery is one of them kind of sorta, because either we have no clue what happened and these people just vanished off the face of the earth, or we have sort of an idea, but neither option is, you know, very palatable. During the 90s, a number of women vanished off the face of the earth. This all happened in this one area of Eastern Ireland, all in the province of Leinster. Eventually, this whole case was dubbed by the media Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. Now, to note, like, who makes up the victims of Ireland's Vanishing Triangle? It kind of changes depending on who you ask and what source you're using, but I'm going to focus on the 6 primary cases that made up Operation Trace, which was the police's operation to try and investigate what actually happened in each of these mysterious and eerie disappearances. I also want to shout out the main source for this old video. That is the book Missing Presumed by Alan Bailey. He's a former police officer who was involved in this case. You might remember I also used another one of his books for the Grange Gorman murders video I covered last year. Pretty good. If you're looking for more, always, of course, check it out. Before we get into it, if stories further dark, I'm talking true crime, I'm talking scary unsolved mysteries, I'm talking horror stories, that kind of thing is also your kind of thing, please subscribe because you'll see it every week. Now, let's give it a go. So to set the scene for the majority of this case and the cases within, it takes place in the east of the Republic of Ireland, all in Leinster, from Louth in the north down to Wexford in the south. Leinster is the most populated part of Ireland, Dublin, sort of right there in the middle. And also just to note kind of a bit of context of what was going on in the country at the time, which is just during the entirety of the 90s. It was a time of great change in the Republic of Ireland. Ireland has always historically been a pretty poor country, even after gaining our independence, like pretty much right up until 1973 when Ireland joined the European Union. That's when kind of things started getting better and better. Then from the late 80s basically onwards, Ireland experienced like a rapid period of economic growth. It went from like one of the poorest countries in Europe to one of the richest countries in Europe really, really rapidly. That period was called a Celtic Tiger. There was a number of reasons why Ireland went from poor to rich so soon. One of the main reasons was we had very pro-business tax rates, maybe a little bit too pro, but also education system around is quite good. English-speaking workforce, it's halfway between the USA and Europe, and then as part of the European Union, kind of the economy just like exploded. Shit hit the fan in 2008, but we're not quite gonna get there.
Wanking bankers.
The point is, people in this time period I'm talking about went from having no money to a lot of money very, very quickly. You know, they were buying houses, they were going on the vacations outside of the country and across the world. They were traveling quite a lot because jobs were everywhere. So people were very mobile at the time. Folk weren't really staying at home as much for the most part. One woman who didn't stay at home and is chronologically the first case in Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, that was Annie McCarrick. Annie was the daughter of Irish parents, but she herself was actually born and raised on Long Island, New York. Her parents had emigrated to the city of Bayport, right in the middle on the south shore of Long Island. And this city was home to a lot of Irish people when she was there. So Annie, an Irish American growing up surrounded by other Irish people, it would only make sense that one day, one of those days, lads, she's gonna want to get home and see the motherland, or fatherland. I don't know how to decide that. Whatever, you know, one of them. So it was in 1987, she actually made the trip across the Atlantic and she arrived back in Ireland. This was part of a school tour, on a school trip, and she was there. Head over heels. She absolutely fell in love with the country, and when she went back to America after this little school tour vacation thing, she literally told her parents, like, that's where I'm going. See you later.
I'm so stupid looking at this camera. I'll look at you instead.
She first moved kind of permanently to Ireland in 1988, a year after she finished school. She went to study in St. Pat's in Drumcondra and then the other St. Pat's in MWIII. She was studying to be a teacher. A lot of people who want to be teachers in Ireland, they go to those schools, like my own mother did. At one point, she did return to New York just to kind of finish up her education, but it was in 1992 that Annie finally said, Sinead, I'm moving there, and sure wasn't. She wanted to be a teacher here, and nothing would stop her. She left New York City for the last time in January of 1993, and she settled in Sandymount, south side of Dublin. And she already had a big gang of mates here from her previous time studying, so she was kind of good to go. She settled in right away. The day before Annie vanished was the 25th of March, 1993. This was about 2 months after she'd moved over. That day, Annie was working. She was still studying, to be a teacher, so she had a part-time job in a cafe. Apparently, she was well-loved. Everybody loved this very sweet American girl who was working in this cafe. Then, that evening, she went to a friend's place before returning home. See, she was waiting for her mother, who was due to come visit in a couple weeks. Her mother was due to come over in April. So then, that next morning, which was Friday the 26th of March, 1993, Annie was yapping away with her mates, that morning. Now, both the two housemates were Irish, and they were planning on going back to their own hometown for the weekend. They'd go back down in the country. So that would leave Annie in the apartment by herself for pretty much the entirety of the weekend. But she had plans that weekend. She was actually getting ready to have some friends over for dinner on that Saturday night. All she said to her two housemates before they left is she planned to go for a walk in Enniskerry that afternoon. Enniskerry is a town just over the border in Wicklow. So for those of you who don't know, Wicklow is a county just south of Dublin. It's very mountainous. There's national parks there. It's really pretty. It's also quite remote. And if you were looking to do something where no one would see you, that's where you would go. We'll come back to Wicklow later on because more parts of the story will take us there. And so, Annie was heading off for a walk in this picturesque town in Wicklow, and she never came back. Annie would only be noticed to be missing the following day, which was the Saturday, when her flatmates rang, nobody answered, and then the guests she was supposed to have over for dinner called. And what we know about the Friday, which was the day she went missing, that morning she went to a nearby supermarket to buy some groceries and stuff like that for the dinner, the dinner she was supposed to have when her friends came over the next day. She went to a bank, and she was seen in the bank on CCTV. She then went home back to her own apartment. She rang up a friend asking if this friend would go for a walk with her in Enniskerry, but the friend couldn't make it. They'd usually go for walks together, but this friend had injured their ankle, so Annie would be going alone, and so she went alone. She was seen getting the bus. She was actually seen by multiple people that day, but somewhere in Enniskerry on this walk, just vanished. What the walk was, what her exact route was, we kind of still don't really know. Now, one possible sighting of Annie was at a pub called Johnny Fox's. It's actually a pretty well-known pub. Apparently, it's the highest pub in Ireland. Now, it's a good bit from Enniskerry. It'd probably be about 40 minutes to an hour walk from where she said she was going. But the doorman at this pub said he thought she came in. He said it was an American. He said he looked like her. He couldn't be 100% sure, but it's kind of widely believed that it was her. That she came in, he stopped her at the door and said, there's a cover charge that particular night, so she said, oh, sorry. And then a man behind this woman, who could have been Annie, paid for her in. The doorman said she looked around and thanked him, but it didn't look like they knew each other. He was just a kind stranger who was paying like the £5 at the time that it would have been in to get into the pub. The doorman said they both then walked in, didn't see them then again for the rest of the night. The searches that followed would lead nowhere, and her family came over and looked for 2 months around Wicklow and found nothing. Now, one friend of Annie's would say she had confided in them shortly before she disappeared that she had some trouble with a man, but I'm not sure if she actually met anybody in Enniskerry. She traveled alone, and she had asked a friend to come with her. So it's not like she would be planning on meeting somebody else if her friend was coming with her. She had plans for that weekend for, cooking dinner. So I don't think there was anything voluntary or expected about what happened to Annie, whatever it was. So here's one theory that the police have, and this was allegedly told to them by a confidential informant, is that Annie did in fact go to Johnny Fox's pub. And there, she met a guy who was in the IRA, if you can believe that. Who's actually the guy who was walking in behind Annie and paid for the cover charge into the bar. So in the bar, Annie and this guy are yapping away and they're drinking together, and I guess to kind of impress her, he starts telling her about all of the terrorism he's doing as a member of the IRA and all that kind of stuff. Then as the night goes on, he realizes probably shouldn't have told her all of the terrorist stuff that I'm doing. So then he has this bright idea. Well, he offers to drive Annie home back to her house in Sandymount,
Securing zone A.
and he doesn't drive her home. Once he gets out to her remote spot, he kills her, and he dumps her in the Wicklow or Dublin mountains. That was one story that was given to the police by a confidential informant about what really happened to Annie McCarrick, but who knows
Friendly
if there's any
forces on
truth to
zone
that
B.
at all. Who knows whatever happened to her? She just went for a walk in this beautiful place that she'd been to many times before, and then she just vanished. It certainly wasn't of her own volition. She had plans for that weekend. She was excited for her mother to come visiting in a couple of weeks. In fact, after she'd gone to the store and dropped the groceries back to her house, she hadn't even unpacked the groceries. She'd kind of just left them inside the door and then headed off to catch the bus. So it seemed like she was kind of, expecting to be right back. Who she encountered out there, in Wicklow, what's called the Garden of Ireland. We don't know. Later investigations by the Gardaí, the police, would deem a lot of those sightings in Enniskerry as unreliable. They would say it wouldn't have been her that night at Johnny Fox's. The weather was shite, it was wet and windy. The doorman simply saw somebody else. There was another sighting of Annie in Enniskerry in a cafe. Nope, the police would say it was not her. Information would be revealed that shortly before Annie disappeared, she'd been assaulted by a man she knew. Apparently that was never followed up on. The police are now focusing their investigation on the disappearance of Annie McCarrick in Sandymount, where she was living, not in Enniskerry, where it's believed she went. It seems the police are chasing their tail at this point with the sightings and with the not-so sightings, cases of mistaken identity or whatever. It seems there was a lot of incompetence from Jump Street, and the case ain't getting any warmer. This case is about people vanish. Who did they encounter? In almost all of these, people who on the surface seemed friendly. Nice to meet you. When underneath there was something very, very different. Your private information can go to places it absolutely... Sure, you wouldn't be having it. It should not. You'd be shocked. It's shocking, where every detail about you can end up and in whose hands and what will they do with it. You ever find your Carrick, Josephine, who went by Jojo Dullard, she too worked as a waitress in a cafe. Though not in Dublin, she lived and worked in the small town of Callan. This is in County Kilkenny, about 90 minutes from Dublin. It's a typical small town country village. It was Jojo's hometown. And in late 1995, Jojo had just moved back. Jojo had previously been living in Dublin, but a broken heart had led her to come back home. She lived alone, though her family, her mother and her 3 siblings, they lived not far away. Her father had sadly passed shortly before she was born. So let's meet Jojo in early November 1995. Now this is 2.5 years after Annie McCarrick unexplainably and mysteriously vanished in Wicklow. This isn't exactly remotely close what happened to Jojo, but they both come under the umbrella of Operation Trace, so it's kind of believed they're as linked, or there could be links between the 2 disappearances. It was on Thursday, November 9th, 1995, that 21-year-old Jojo Dullard, she was getting a bus back into Dublin City. See, Jojo had previously been living in Dublin City, and shortly before she left, she'd gone on welfare, so she would collect her welfare checks in the city. She was due to collect her final welfare check, so she was getting the bus into the city. She went in there, she got her check, and while she was there, she popped into a bar on Grafton Street that she used to go to all the time, just to see if any of the old crowd are around, a bar called Bruxelles. And so she went in there, and in fact, some of the gang were in there. So she, in fact, ended up spending most of the day in this bar, sculling pints with the gang. That evening, she was actually kind of supposed to stay in Dublin City for a romantic rendezvous, if you will, with a guy there, but his ex-girlfriend kind of busted in at the last moment and shot that shit down coast to coast. So Jojo, she was kind of thinking, it's getting pretty late, and she'd had a few beers in her. She wasn't sure if she should try and find a hostel or a place to stay for the night. But she just went to the bus station kind of on a whim. Maybe there might be one final bus leaving for the day and I can get home. She arrived to the bus station shortly after 9 p.m. and there was one final bus leaving. Now this bus was actually going to Naas, not to Kilkenny, Callan in Kilkenny where she lived. Naas, it's about a quarter of the way towards where she wanted to go, but she thought, listen, it's the last bus. I'll get to Naas, this town in Kildare, and I'll just try and, bum my way out from there. I'll try and hitchhike from there home. Ireland is typically, very safe country, although this story will probably make you think quite different. But, even safer back then. So hitchhiking was, fairly common. She arrived in Naas and then hitchhiked on to 2 further towns, Kilcullen, and then got another ride to Moon in County Kildare. She was about halfway home, so by this stage, but it was getting fairly late. It was about 11:30 p.m. by the time she arrived in this small town, Moon. So she got out of this guy's car, thanked him, and said, "Slán, Now, the only light, though, in the small country village was the light of the public telephone, the pay telephone in town. So she went over to the pay telephone, and she was going to call one of her friends, a friend named Mary, and she was going to sort of tell her about her day and, oh, hey, you know, kind of mind coming to get me? That was, you know, the idea of how this conversation would go. So she went into the telephone box, but she kind of had the door open, so the box opened up. Also, this telephone was right on the main road, so she was kind of talking on the phone to her friend Mary with one hand, while also like sticking the tongue out of the box with the other, in case any passing cars might, you know, give her a ride home. A number of motorists, by the way, drove by, and they would say they saw a woman at this time, like halfway leaning out of the public telephone box. So Mary answered, and Jojo and Mary were kind of yapping away for a bit, when all of a sudden, Mary would say, Jojo said, hold on for a second. She put the phone down. Mary would say she heard nothing for about 30 seconds. Then Jojo came back breathless, as if she just ran back to the phone and simply said, I have a lift, I'm off. Some passing motorist had decided to give her a ride. And that was the last Jojo Dollars was ever heard from or seen. Nothing is known about the car, the driver, anything. Just Jojo said, somebody here's giving me a ride. That was it. Sinead.
The last reported contact of 21-year-old Josephine Dollard is when it's claimed she called a friend, Mary Cullinan, at around 11:15 p.m. on Thursday last from the Kildare village of Moon.
To date, we have interviewed over 2,000 people. We have taken approximately 500 statements.
Now, some things were weird about that night. One was a witness saw a woman running from the telephone box to a car, a Toyota Carina, which is a popular car around that time. She said she saw this woman running to this Toyota, which was obviously pulled over to give her a lift, but the woman got into the rear of the car, not into the passenger seat, which would maybe lead you to believe there were multiple people inside this vehicle, or there could have been just like shite on the passenger seat. More likely, though, there could have been somebody else in there, in the car Jojo got into. Then later, a number of people in the next town over from Moon, a town called Castledermot, they would say they saw a woman matching Jojo Dillard's description just walking through the main street. Then finally, a taxi driver would report to police that he saw a woman sprinting, booking it, out of a car in a town called Kilmacow in the early hours of the 10th of November. Now, this was about 1 a.m. and Kilmacow was about an hour from Moon, so the timeline actually perfectly matches up with, you know, if Jojo had gotten into the car, she would be in this town at this time. He said he saw this woman, possibly matching Jojo Dillard's description, sprinting out of the car. Two men got out of the car, ran after her, dragged her back in, and then sped off. Hundreds of volunteers searched for weeks, but nothing of Jojo's was ever found. Now, public police went out. This was on the telly. It was everywhere. Two of the people who gave Jojo Dillard a ride, who she was hitchhiking with, came forward. The first guy who drove her to the first town, and then the next guy who drove her to Moon, dropped her off Moon. They both came forward to the guards and said, yeah, you know, whatever you want to know. Whoever Jojo got in with that last car, they never came forward. Fiona Pender was the next woman to vanish in Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, though very, very different, in a very different way and a very different place from both Annie and Jojo. Fiona was 25 years of age, and she lived in Tullamore, County Offaly. Fiona lived with her boyfriend John and was pregnant, back home, ETA 8 weeks. She was, by all accounts, an excellent hairdresser and an even better motorcyclist. Apparently, in the local motorcycle group club, she was like #1 at riding hard. In fact, that's where she met John, in a motorcycle club. Though about a year before our story takes place, she actually been sworn off motorcyclists. See, her brother had sadly passed away in a motorbike accident, and ever since her brother died, he left behind, you know, his partner, 3-year-old kid. Fiona kind of swore off. She said she would never get on a motorcycle ever again. The death of her brother really affected her incredibly deeply. Fiona and John, they actually said they couldn't live in Tullamore anymore. They ended up moving to London for a while. But John, he was homesick. Family, the farm, all that kind of stuff back in Tullamore. So Fiona and John, then they moved back to her hometown. On Thursday, August 22nd, 1996, Fiona spent the day with her parents. You know, they were going around, they were baby shopping for clothes and all that kind of stuff. And then they dropped her back at her apartment as she lived in with her man John that evening. On the Friday morning, John was out at 5,000. He had to be up and out for work. He was up at like 6 a.m. and out the door early. Now, John would say that morning, she was up, Fiona was up, but she was complaining about heartburn as he was leaving. But that was it. He walked out the door and he didn't see her again. No one saw her again. Her parents popped by the apartment that day twice. Both of them, like, separately popped by, and both would say they saw the curtains drawn. So they assumed Fiona was resting, like, you know, pregnancy stuff, but they didn't, you know, see anything else weird. The house, like, the apartment was dark the entire time. John actually spent that night with his own parents back in their house, so nobody noticed anything weird in the apartment or noticed Fiona was missing that day. Fiona was only noticed missing the next day, which was the Saturday. The apartment was empty, and when the police searched it, you know, when she was reported missing, they found nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of a disturbance, no signs of violence, nothing missing whatsoever. In fact, the only thing that was missing was some of Fiona's clothes, which is kind of what it's believed she would have put on and headed out for the day. Now, I already know what you're thinking. The last person to see her, John. He just happens to be the last person to see her that morning, and then he just coincidentally happens to spend that night in his parents' home. What are the odds of that? But yeah, no.
Enemy action on Zone B.
They searched everywhere. No signs of violence in the house. A huge search was carried out. Fiona was popular in town and heavily pregnant at the time. There were more sightings of her around town, but none were concrete at all. They could have been from previous days, or they got the timeline mixed up. In fact, regarding whatever happened to Fiona, nothing happened for 12 years until somebody found something that's really eerie and really, really creepy. In 2008, 12 years after Fiona vanished, a hiker found something really strange in the nearby mountains. This is in the Slieve Bloom Mountains, which are just outside of Tullamore. And in the Slieve Bloom Mountains is Slieve Bloom Way. It's like a trail you can go on that takes you through the mountains. The hiker was going there through one day, beautiful summer's day, and they saw just off the trail a makeshift cross. On the cross was written, Fiona Pender buried here, Thursday, August 22nd, 1996. A huge search was done of the area, but nothing was found. No burial.
Unfortunately, despite significant efforts and large-scale investigations down the years, we have not been successful to date in recovering Fiona.
However, the Gardaí said they don't believe that to be a hoax. They think it is legit, that this is a sign of guilt from the killer, that they wrote this and they left it there, dumping her body in the mountains. So that's really eerie and really creepy. And as I said, the police, the Gardaí, believe it to be not just a random person did it. But there's two things that are really interesting about that. One is that John said he last seen Fiona on the morning as he was heading out to work on August 23rd. But the cross says buried here August 22nd. Another thing is that in Ireland, we do, you know, date, then month, then year. So it would be 22nd of August, 1996, but the makeshift cross says August 22nd. It's something like so small, but it's just kind of like struck me as odd. Why the police believe this to be real, placed by the killer? They've never actually said why they think it's legit. They have said there is a suspect, never named. Ireland is, you know, with the police investigations tend to be pretty closed-mouthed. There's, you know, persons of interest and that kind of thing. They don't publicly name them, really. The only thing they've said is that August 22nd, the day that was written on the cross, it coincides with a hugely traumatic incident that happened in their main suspect's life. Now, another suspect, or perhaps it's the same guy, as I said, they've never released names, moved to Saskatoon in Canada. He was actually arrested there in 2014 for sexually assaulting and threatening to murder his partner in Canada. And apparently this woman would say he told her all about how he murdered Fiona Pender, who he is. Anything about that has never been released.
Secure the capture zone.
I think it goes without saying that one suspect in the disappearance of Fiona Pender was John, her partner. John and his father were arrested shortly after Fiona's disappearance in relation to it, but were released quickly. John also moved to Canada, to Saskatoon, if you can believe that. Now, some people out there might speculate that perhaps he was the same person who was arrested in Saskatoon that I just mentioned, but I couldn't possibly speculate myself, of course. The man in Saskatoon who was arrested was never convicted of any crimes, so he cannot be named. He did move to Canada 4 years after the cross was found, and you know, again, it kind of just rings a bell that the date on the cross says one thing and John says another. Kind of weird.
A really fun sister to have, looking back, you know. I've nothing but good memories of childhood with her. She was bright and bubbly. It certainly took its toll on the family, and the most heartbreaking thing was seeing the stress that it caused in the house, seeing how it aged my dad affected him terrible.
Keep hoping that she's out there and she's okay.
I honestly feel that my dad died of a broken heart, you know. He took his own life. We have a monument for him, I'm very happy to have. And it's a great place to pay respects here.
In February 1997, 17-year-old Kira Breen disappeared from Dundalk, County Louth. Now, you might have noticed that all these cases seem to be kind of taking place quite a ways from each other, but you actually got to remember, Ireland is very small. So really, none of these cases take place more than an hour from the other one. Kira was last seen in her bed in her home that she shared with her mother, Bernadette. However, on Thursday, February 13th, 1997, at 1 a.m., Bernadette had gotten up in the middle of the night to use the toilet. When Bernadette got up that night, she noticed Kira was not in her bed as she should have been. She went into Kira's room, had a Google about, saw that the window was open but on the latch. She immediately just assumed Kira had snuck out in the middle of the night, had left the window open on the latch, and she was planning on sneaking back in. But Bernadette, she was pretty frazzled by this, as you can imagine. She stayed up all night waiting for Kira to come home. But Bernadette had to go to Dublin in the morning. She actually had just gotten diagnosed with the cancer. So she was heading to Dublin to get the results of her biopsy. So she went down to Dublin, then came back, then reported her daughter Kira missing. She still hadn't come home by that stage. So, who did Kira go out to meet with that night? Because that's most certainly what's believed to have happened. Like, Bernadette believed Kira had gone out to meet with someone or some people that Bernadette didn't approve of. Hence why she was sneaking out up to no good. As teens are in the middle of the night. It was reported that Kira had a few issues at the time of her disappearance. Her mother's diagnosis affected her a lot. She was about to meet her biological father. She hadn't met him as he emigrated to America before she was born. She was due to have a fairly serious dental operation. And she had previously run away from home, but returned after 5 days. Now, there were rumors in the town of this, predatory group who were, I don't know what the best way to word it is, but hunting younger girls and teen girls, pimping them out, you know yourself, that kind of stuff. Apparently there was one of these guys who was twice Kira's age, was hunting after her. Hundreds of interviews were done, everywhere was searched. Dundalk is pretty close to the border with Northern Ireland. Searches were done there. It's not thought that she ran away that night. As I said, Kira's mother's, cancer diagnosis, it affected her quite a lot. She would have been there to find out what the results were. I believe the results were good, by the way. She also didn't take anything of value with her if she was going to run away. Now, allegedly, earlier on in the day, just before she vanished, an older man, this older man who'd kind of been hunting Kira, he'd said to her that he would see her later on that day. And a lot of witnesses, like teens who were there at the time with Kira, said, oh yeah, we heard him say that to Kira, that he was going to see her later on that night. Of course, the police interviewed this guy, they, interrogated him. He denied it, completely denied it. The police, teens, who knows what's going through their noggin. Interviewed these teens who allegedly heard him say this to Kira, that he was going to see her later. They stuck to their story as years went by, thinking he'd just stick with this story. As I said, he was arrested, he was questioned, he denied it, and he was released without charge. And that was it. That was the only lead they had. No one knows what happened to her. Fiona Sinnott was from County Wexford, and she was living in Broadway, County Wexford. She was 19 years of age on February 9th, 1998. She had recently broken up with a man, so she was living alone with her 19-month-old baby, Emma, in this village, but it wasn't too far away from her family. Now, the man she just recently broken up with, well, he was a real piece of work. He had been abusing Fiona for a long time in every way, in the most horrific of ways, and she had sent her to the hospital numerous times. The guards have been called to their home multiple times, but charges were never pressed against him, because he always somehow kind of managed to talk his way out of it, and Fiona would never press charges. Like, he would say, you know what, she's just provoking me. She's bringing out the worst of me. Can you believe it? It's kind of her fault, really. And he's only beating 7 shades of shite out of her because he loves her so much. He just cares too much. That's his problem. One of those groups. It was on February 8th, 1998, that Fiona was going to the local pub to meet up with some friends and have a few drinks. Her 11-month-old daughter, Emma, was with her ex-partner, Sean, with his parents that evening. In fact, her baby daddy, Sean, he popped in too. They had been together for a few years previously, but they obviously broken up. Anyways, that night, Fiona's there with her friends and they're drinking pints, and her friends noticed that Fiona seemed like she was in pain. She was complaining and kind of wincing about this pain in her upper chest and in her upper arm. Now, it's believed this could have been from the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her ex-boyfriend, but she was kind of complaining about that all night, but kind of brushing off when they would ask what's wrong with her. Then at closing time, Fiona left the pub to walk a quarter-mile home. Some people say they seen her walking alone. Other people said they seen her walking with Sean, that he said. He told her and said, okay, I'll walk you home. Screams were later reported coming, but nobody chose to investigate what those screams were. Sean would of course later be questioned in regards to her disappearance, and he would say he walked her home, they went in the door, she went straight to bed because of the pain she was in, she went straight in onto the lava, and then he said he crashed on the couch that night. Next morning he said he woke up, he went into her room, he said she was there, she was awake, but she still had this horrible pain and she couldn't shake it, so she said she was going to go to the doctors to have a go with this, see what's the matter. Sean said he just gave her some money, some cash to try and get the bus to the doctors, and then he said he left. His mom was waiting outside to pick him up and take him home back to where he lived with his parents, and they were looking after his daughter Emma as well. Fiona never went to any doctors that day. In fact, she was never seen again. Fiona wasn't actually reported missing for 9 days, if you can believe it. Now, Fiona was kind of known to go around and go to visit different cities and go and stay with friends, so her parents didn't really just think it was that weird, but they also didn't know she was missing until all that time had passed. What was really weird, besides what I just said, and I'll get back to that, is that when the Gardaí went to Fiona Sinnott's home to see her, see if they could find out where she gone, they searched her place. There's no signs of a disturbance, no signs of an attack or blood or forensic evidence or anything else. The place was empty. Empty, as in completely empty. Her home was stripped bare. It was as if nobody lived there at all. Now, 19-year-old Fiona was known to be quite messy. She wasn't the most house-bred person out there. And a local would also come forward to the police when the investigation and the news of Fiona being missing kind of came out. The local would come forward to the police and say that between the day she was last seen at the pub that night to when, she was reported missing, which is 9 days later, he had been driving by her house and he had seen like a dozen big black refuse sacks just lying outside her house. It was as if they were waiting for like the trash man, the bin man, to come and collect, these big refuse sacks. Didn't seem like Fiona had been the one to leave those refuse bags outside. And the farmer, if you can believe it, would also later come forward and say he had gone up one morning to check out his fields and check out his land. And guess what? He's seen in the corner of one of his fields about a dozen black trash bags. So he's thinking to himself, here we go. It's somebody just dumping their shite instead of paying the garbage man to take it away. It happens a lot of time on these country roads, right? People just dumping their shit. So he goes over and he opens one of the bags to see what was in it. He sees medication with the name Fiona Sinnott on it, like pill bottles and stuff with her name and her address. It was her old address, though, not her current one. And this was before he even knew she was missing. So the farmer then just thinks this Fiona woman is dumping shit on his land. He burns it, set fire to it all, destroying any evidence that would have been left behind. And then a couple of days later, he hears on the news, that woman's missing, and that was potential evidence. And now he's thinking, shite. The police have often stated that they believe their main suspect is Fiona's ex, the abusive one, that he finally came and murdered her. That he had his little henchmen, his buddies, hide the body. See, the thing about small town Ireland is that it's full of gossip and rumors and, people spreading all this kind of shit. There's a lot of rumors went on about what actually happened to Fiona, that her body had been dumped in a lake, and police went and searched all the lakes, and they didn't find her. A quarry. Nope, couldn't find her. People on their deathbed saying, I believe she was buried. I heard, that she was buried in this field, and they were too scared to say this one they were alive, but now that I'm about to die, I'll tell you. Police went and searched the field. They found nothing. There's a few theories about what really happened to Fiona. I mean, screams were heard. Also, Sean's family didn't report her missing to anybody. So, I mean, Sean's family had Emma, Fiona's daughter. They never kind of thought it was weird that Fiona never came to collect her when she should have. In fact, like her own family didn't know she was missing. So they would have known before her own family knew she was missing. When she never arrived to collect her daughter, they never interacted with Fiona's family. They never did anything kind of like media related to help, get the word out there about the fact that she was missing and nobody knew what happened. See, one of the things I found really confusing about researching the story of Fiona Sinnott is, and I used The Missing Presumed by Alan Bailey and also Vanishing Triangle by Claire McGowan. as sources for the story is both books describe Sean Carroll and the abusive ex as two completely different people. But you should also know that the abusive ex, as Fiona never pressed any charges, was never convicted of anything, the bar for defamation in Ireland, it's also quite low. I don't know. I can't possibly speculate about any exes Fiona would have had. But another thing, much like in the story of the other Fiona Pender, is that something really, really weird happened years after she was last seen. In 2008, a plaque was commissioned to celebrate Fiona's life, and it was placed in a nearby cemetery to where she lived. The day before the plaque was due to be unveiled, it was stolen.
Yesterday afternoon, workmen erected a marble plaque in memory of 19-year-old Fiona Sinnott, missing since February 1998. The plaque was to be blessed and unveiled today, but family members discovered this morning at 9:30 the plaque had been stolen.
It was a big blow for us now for that to happen for us today, you know. Yeah, but we won't give up. The memory is going to be alive and it's going to stay alive.
The police believe it was stolen by either the killer or someone acting on the killer's behalf. This seems to be a case of everybody knows who did it, they just can't prove it. Deirdre Jacob was 18 years of age, living in Newbridge, County Kildare. Well, okay, she wasn't actually living there. See, this was in July 1998, and this was back home. She was back home in her family house for the summer break because she was actually studying in London at St. Mary's University. She was studying to be a teacher there. So that's where she would be during the semester, but she was off during summer vacation. At about 3 p.m. on Wednesday, July 28, 1998, Deirdre Jacob was seen for the last time right outside her own house. She was seen by a neighbor like she was just walking in. Then 3 hours later, around 6 p.m., her mother comes home from work, finds out Deirdre is not where she should be, in the house. And that day, Deirdre had to do some chores around the home. She went to a bank. She had to pay for her rent. Over in London, she went to visit her grandmother, Bridget. And then she was seen walking back towards her house by multiple people. Hey, Deirdre, all that sort of stuff. A neighbor was the last person to see her, and he said he spotted her just outside her own front gate. She was, so there was her house and then a road, and then he seen Deirdre standing just on the other side of the road from her house, as if waiting, you know, as if cars were coming so she could cross. And that was it. Doesn't seem like she got into her house that evening. A search began for her because this was really, really weird. Deirdre was only home for a couple of weeks, and she was known as like incredibly dependable. It was within an hour of them noticing she's not where she should be that they began searching for her in Newbridge. Unlike some of the other cases with maybe links to shady folk, Deirdre had none. Last seen on a beautiful summer's day on her own doorstep. A huge search was done, but nothing was found. The prevailing theory about what actually happened to Deirdre Jacob was that a opportunistic predator had just been driving by and abducted her, either waiting or otherwise. Like this had been, the police believed that this had been pre-planned, not like somebody was stalking Deirdre specifically, but a predator had been out there, like driving in a car or in a van, looking, determined to get someone. Deirdre just happens to be unlucky enough to be the one who got got. It is weird though that the neighbor who was apparently outside his house, and again last person to see her, he said hello to her as she walked by. He said he didn't hear anything, any screams or see any strange vehicles go past or anything like that. See, 18 months later and less than 50 kilometers away, another woman was sexually assaulted in a very similar attack, but she survived. The guy who did that was named Larry Murphy. He sucks a lot. While serving time for that other attack in prison, Larry allegedly confessed to murdering Deirdre Jacob. Now, this story, which doesn't come from a credible witness, mind you, comes from another violent inmate, would say that Larry, you know, they're shooting the shit in prison, and Larry had told him he had been driving through Newbridge in his van with a map, and he had pulled over on the side of the road where he saw Deirdre Jacob, and he was, you know, leaning out the window asking for directions. When Deirdre came up to speak with him, he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into his car, and then he sped off, drove from a remote location, abused her, killed her, dumped her out there in the woods. Apparently, this violent inmate was telling the police later on that Larry Murphy confessed to murdering her. He told this to the police later on because he had a daughter of his own and was worried about having somebody like that out there. We will come back to him. So all of the women I just went through were part of Operation Trace. This was a task force that was set up in 1998. Basically, you know, a lot of women have gone missing, and this is some crazy, creepy, unsolved mystery, so we should probably try and crack this case. Under Operation Trace, they only focused on the 6 cases I just went through. I'm not exactly sure what their criteria was, but I guess they somehow believed all of these 6 were linked somehow altogether. The links seem kind of tenuous at best, and in some of the cases, as I mentioned, it seems like there's definite suspects of who they truly believed did it that don't seem remotely linked to any of the other cases. But an idea that they had regarding this entire, the entire Ireland's Vanishing Triangle was that there was a serial killer out there hunting these women over this, 10-year period. Unfortunately, though, they did not see great success going through these cases as I went through. And the 6 cases I just covered, well, there's a lot more that kind of get lumped in with Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, a lot more. Not just unsolved disappearances, but also unsolved murders, too. Eva Brennan went missing in July 1993. She'd been having lunch with a family who had got into an argument and left. When they didn't see her for days, they broke into her place. They found her jacket inside, what she was wearing when they last saw her, but no sign of her. She's never been found. Imelda Keenan was living in and disappeared from Waterford City in 1994. She was seen walking towards the post office in the city. Many people saw her walking that day. She said she seemed fine. She was doing her business in town. Somehow she vanished. The unsolved deaths of Antoinette Smith, Patricia Doherty, and Marie Kilmartin, they're also linked to Ireland's Vanishing Triangle. Once again, all in the same area, but their bodies have been found. They were all strangled and left in these remote areas and in the Wicklow Mountains too. So a name that often comes up in this case, or cases, is Larry Murphy, as I mentioned. He's kind of considered to be the prime suspect in at least a few of these cases. You know, I'm trying to curse less in my videos, but it's people like Larry Murphy who make... it's very hard, because the only way to describe him is the ultimate sex shite. He was considered to be a hard-working, happily married family man. They always are. A tradesman with a wife, 2 kids, soon to be 3. That is up until February 2000. On February 11th, 2000, a young woman was closing up her clothing store in Carlow Town. She was closing up around 8 p.m. and then she was walking to her car, which was parked in a nearby multi-story car park. In that car park, he attacked her and kidnapped her using her own vehicle. Now, a woman who lived nearby would say she had seen a shadowy figure in this specific multi-story car park in the days leading up to this. So someone was out there scoping it out and practicing. So Larry Murphy drove this woman in her car, then to his own car, and he managed to drag her out, put her into the trunk of his own car, then off he went. Listened to music on the radio, driving out of Carlow Town to find a quiet area. He drove to a remote place out of town, dragged her out of the car trunk into the backseat of the car, assaulted her, and then put her back into the trunk of the car and drove off. He did this multiple times, keeping her in the pitch blackness of the trunk, driving for a while, finding a quiet spot, getting out of the car, opening it, dragging her out of the trunk into the back of the car, assaulting her yet again, putting her into the trunk, and then going off once again. At one point, she tried to run, and she almost made it, but he grabbed her, dragged her back to the trunk of the car, and put a plastic bag over her head, and started choking her, started killing her. Just as she was about to lose consciousness, she would say she saw 2 headlights illuminate Larry Murphy. This was in a remote place called Kilranilla Forest in County Wicklow. 2 passing hunters just so happened to come across them. When they were discovered by these passing hunters, Larry was choking her out, he threw her to the ground, and he drove off. These 2 hunters, it's okay, they took her to the police. And in fact, one of the hunters was actually able to identify the guy he had seen as Larry Murphy, because a couple of weeks previous, this hunter had been in the pub with some of his friends, and a woman who was there told this hunter, she pointed over to a guy at the pub and said, "That's Larry Murphy. He's an absolute creep." She told him that previously he had been staring at her all night, he had been following her around. She even believed at one point he tried to sexually assault her, and that he was known as basically an incredibly creepy piece of shit by basically everyone in the area. So it was incredibly easy to identify who this was, and he was soon arrested in his own home by the police. 35-year-old Larry Murphy would even admit what he had done, but say it wasn't pre-planned, and it certainly was, and he would say it was even consensual after a while, and that he was remorseful. I mean, whatever he figured would get him one of them lighter sentences. Am I right? He gets sentenced to 15 years in prison. He would end up serving less than 10, and people were pretty outraged by this.
A taxi pulled up outside Arbor Hill Prison, and at 17 minutes past 10 this morning, the convicted sex offender Larry Murphy walked out to be driven away. He had served every day he was supposed to of the 10.5 years from the 15 he was sentenced to with remission. He left a fit, strong, healthy 45-year-old man. He has some money, but few friends. His family have disowned him. His wife has left him and taken their children. Larry Murphy never spoke about his crime or other crimes while he was in prison here for the past 10 years to fellow inmates, prison officers, or Gardaí who sought to interview him. When his brother asked him why he did what he did, he told him he had simply flipped out. He has now been categorized as a high-risk sex offender, and even though he has 7 days to register his new address with the Gardaí, he is being closely watched.
And it was during that time in prison that he allegedly confessed to murdering Deirdre Jacob. He was working not far from Newbridge at the time, and in the CCTV footage of when Deirdre Jacob went into the bank to pay for her rent in London, there was a man standing right behind Deirdre who kind of looked a lot like Larry Murphy, but the footage wasn't good enough quality to make a positive identification that it was him. But maybe he had been in the bank and had seen her and followed her or something. He later went into hiding in Spain, then Amsterdam, living with another sex offender, and then later moved to London, where he works today on construction sites.
10 years ago, last February, he brutally kidnapped and raped a 28-year-old Carlow businesswoman in the Wicklow Mountains before trying to suffocate her. He was only caught when two men out hunting came across the scene. Murphy is also prime suspect in the disappearance of 3 women who went missing in the Leinster area in the 1990s. Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dullard, and Deirdre Jacob.
Now, other than Deirdre Jacob, where he allegedly confessed, and kind of just how he acted towards that one victim who managed to survive, well, a lot of the others vanished not far from where he lived. He lived kind of like right in the middle of where all these women vanished, kind of like radiating outward. Kind of been especially tipped towards Annie McCarrick and Jojo Dullard. One of the unsolved murders I also mentioned, Antoinette Smith, her body was found assaulted with plastic bags over her head, as Larry Murphy did to the unnamed victim, and she was later found in the Wicklow area, not far from Kilranelagh Forest, which kind of just like follows his pattern. While in prison, he received any treatment whatsoever. It seemed like he was at a very high risk of reoffending, but he also just seemed like someone who had no morals or conscience or anything at all, maybe like somebody who's been doing this for quite some time. And by, again, what he did to that one victim who managed to survive, it seemed like he'd been kind of, practiced at it. Apparently, recently, cadaver dogs also hit on a spot not far from where he used to live, where they found this kind of underground bunker or underground cave. Cadaver dogs apparently have lit up in that area, as in there are bodies there, but it hasn't been searched. And that is the story of Ireland's vanishing triangle, an eerie case, very famous and very scary in Ireland, anyways. It also led to changes in the police, how they investigate missing persons, systems to track people, and it also led to the change that even in places like Ireland, where you kind of think you're safe, there are monsters all around us, like Larry Murphy and others. Sleep well, Sinead. Thank you so much for watching. It really means the absolute world to me that you're here watching this whole video. I can never thank you.
I don't know why, for a brief moment, I thought the Democratic Party would do like the courageous thing and the right thing for its own survival, but they're gearing up for the Brandon run. They're doing the Brandon push.
The delegates,
Bro, down to the 25th Amendment being a potential weapon against the sitting president. This is literally a rerun. It's the blue version of the same that we watched when Trump was president. So now, him being an incredibly narcissistic, doddering old fool who's bringing his fail son into the White House, who's causing a state of panic within the Democratic Party that is disorganized in the eyes of the moderates, that makes the Democratic Party look just as chaotic as the Republicans.
And tonight,
Trump talked to Sean Hannity, where he basically on Biden in a way that like many people have Trump.
Chaos is brewing in the Democratic Party as calls for Joe Biden to drop out are growing. Joining us now for an exclusive interview on the phone, former President Donald Trump. Mr. President, great to have you, sir. How are you?
Allied forces
Well, thank you very much, Sean. I'm fine. Thank you.
Let's go back to the debate with you and President Biden, because immediately you could notice his voice was raspy, but beyond that, within minutes, I could tell this was not going to be a good night for Joe Biden. What was going through your head at that time?
Well, it was a big evening, and you could feel a lot of energy. Boy, energy like you haven't felt in a long time. On any of the debates, I've done a lot of debates, and we've had great success with debates, but this was something very special. For whatever reason, it just seemed big. And when I got to Atlanta, and this was at CNN headquarters, there was a lot of excitement. There were trucks, I call them the $10 million trucks. That's with the antennas all over, and very incredible equipment. I'm looking at things that are, you know, it's just more of a scene than it normally would be. And it really was that way right from the start, right from the moment they introduced us, and then they introduced him and introduced me, and I walked out and I saw him, and he looked extremely pale, to put it nicely. And I don't know, maybe it was a good makeup job, or maybe it wasn't, but he was a very pale-looking man. And when he started to speak, I don't know, I thought his voice was weak. I didn't know exactly what was happening. It was strange. I do have to say that the CNN, Jake and Dana, were really, they were pretty good. They were, I thought they were fair. I thought they were fair in the questions. I thought to him, to me. But it was a strange evening. I will tell you, it was a strange debate, because within a couple of minutes, the answers given by him were, they didn't make a lot of sense.
Well, let me ask you this. I think some of the worst moments for President Biden were when he wasn't talking. There was like this blank, vacant stare, and it's like he was checked out. And I run a montage of it. When you were speaking and you'd look over, did you notice that too, or?
You know, I was thinking about what I was saying. I wasn't looking over at him almost at all, except when he went a little bit haywire. I didn't look at him at all. And I'm very disappointed in him. He's the worst president in the history of our country. We've never had anything like it, what he's done to our borders, what he's done to our country.